This time, it's 6 of history's most important motorcycles. Now they do say it's important to be nice, but sometimes it's very nice to be important too. And importance of motorcycling can come from being the first, like the Motorrad, or simply being pioneering in a particular element of design, or revolutionising the market with a bold new product. The Honda CB750. The Honda CB750 was not the first 4-cylinder motorcycle by any means, but it was the first mass-produced 4-cylinder bike to come out of Japan, and would set the standard for what would be the UJM, or ubiquitous Japanese motorcycle, into the 70s and 1980s. The bike used a single overhead cam, 750cc dry sump engine. The styling wasn't particularly revolutionary. In fact, in some ways it was a little conservative, except possibly those 4 striking exhaust pipes sticking out the side. Right from the beginning, the bike incorporated a Electrostar and a disc brake at the front, and compared to most of its European and British opposition, it looked thoroughly modern. Top speed was around 124 miles an hour. The bike had a 5-speed gearbox, and the handling, whilst not fantastic, was just about capable of keeping up with the power of the engine. There's no doubt that the 750 completely revolutionised the market. Before the CB750, virtually no across-the-frame 4s were available. Afterwards, pretty much every manufacturer, especially from Japan, was striving to produce one. Quite simply, the machine set the pattern for the next few decades, from Japanese manufacturers and European too in some cases. The bike would remain in Honda's lineup for around a decade, with 400,000 bikes being manufactured, completely taking the market by storm and wiping away the Triumph triples. These bikes would sell in puny numbers of around 27,000 by comparison. Perhaps the only downside of the CB750 was it stayed around for that little bit too long. Honda were investing heavily in car production, and by the time the Honda faded out of view, it was completely obsolete in an era of direct overhead cam, and in many cases 4-valve engines. But there's no doubt that the CB750 saw Honda setting a standard which all others would have to follow. The Honda Super Cub. In 1956, Sakura Honda and Takeo Fujisawa toured Germany, and they witnessed there the popularity of mopeds and other lightweight motorcycles. They quickly realised there was a huge gap in the market for a reliable 4-stroke machine, which could be cleaner and smoother running than the 2-stroke mopeds that were buzzing around Germany at the time. Honda unveiled the all-new Super Cub in 1958. Right from the beginning, the pressed steel frame underlined the German influence of the machine, but the single overhead cam engine was all Honda, clean, efficient, and with the now famed semi-automatic transmission. Design legend has it to free up the carrying hand of noodle sellers in Japan. Compared to the Villiers-powered opposition then very prevalent in the UK, the Honda was smooth, efficient and reliable, and not without its sophistication. Because while that pressed steel suspension was not the best, and the brakes were pretty average, there was no doubt in the fact that that plastic bodywork offered excellent weather protection. The machine was designed to appeal to non-motorcyclists, and it did just that, particularly in America with campaigns like You Meet the Nicest People on the Honda, where it was a massive success. And worldwide, the Honda has gone on to be the best-selling vehicle of any type in the world. And today, a 125 version ensures that the name continues and will go on for the next decade at least. The Triumph Speed Twin. Contrary to popular belief, the Speed Twin was not the first parallel twin onto the market. In fact, it wasn't even the first Triumph parallel twin onto the market, that honour going to the 6.1 designed by Volpage a few years earlier. But the Speed Twin offered stylish, sporty looks that the 6.1 simply couldn't match, and the bike was an instant sales success in the years immediately before World War II. Compared to the V-twins and singles then popular in the late 30s, the engine was smoother than a single, yet more compact than a V-twin, and cheaper to manufacture too. Designer Edward Turner's great gift had always been that of styling, and in the Speed Twin, he got the styling just about perfect. Chrome tanks, the maroon colour, everything just looks right. As the saying goes, if a bike looks right, it probably goes right. And in the case of the Speed Twin, this was definitely the case. The bike was a massive sales success, and even though it only had 2 years before World War II would break out, the other manufacturers saw the writing was on the wall for their V-twins, and many of them switched over and immediately began to develop their own parallel twins. And when the war ended, all the major manufacturers in Britain were now producing parallel twins. Parallel twin had essentially become the UBM, the ubiquitous British motorcycle. And for better or worse, the British industry would stick by this design philosophy right until the bitter end. As a model, the Speed Twin would continue through unit construction in the late 50s before being phased out of the Triumph range in the late 60s. The DKW RT125. DKW was a German manufacturer which is best known for its pioneering work in the field of two-stroke engines. Developed in the 1930s, the RT125 made pioneering use of loop scavenging in its combustion chambers, thus replacing the deflector pistons which were common in two-strokes at that time. At the end of World War II, DKW would continue to produce the RT125 and develop the machine for a number of iterations. Also after the war, as part of war reparations, the simple design was handed over to a number of companies, and so the little RT would go on to be produced by a number of companies with a number of different names and a number of different forms. These included the Harley-Davidson Hummer, the first MZs in Eastern Germany, and in a number of forms in the Soviet Union, including the Minsk. In the United States, Harley-Davidson would sell the bike as the Hummer through the 1950s, and in Japan, Yamaha would use the RT as their basis for their first production motorcycle. But undoubtedly the best known derivative of the RT was the BSA Bantam. BSA mirrored the design of the engine to produce a more traditional British layout, and would sell the machine right up until 1971. It's not clear exactly how many BSA Bantams were sold, but it is most certainly the best-selling British motorcycle of all time, and yet was really a German at heart. The Scott Squirrel. Founded in Bradford in 1908 by Alfred Angus Scott, the Scott Motor Company was undoubtedly the true great pioneer of the two-stroke motorcycle. Scott always claimed that he was drawn to the use of two-strokes because they reminded him of the steam engines in which he trained as a young engineer. And as an engineer, many of Scott's ideas were truly pioneering. He introduced the first parallel twin liquid-cooled two-stroke engine to be used in a motorcycle, and before the advent of countershaft gearboxes, he came up with a highly unusual and very clever two-speed gear system which used two separate chain drives. You simply move the pedal between the two to select the different gears. Oh, and he also invented the kickstart too. And in stark contrast to the pre-mixed two-strokes of the 1950s and 60s, Scott's machine used automatic oiling right from the very start. Early machines had a highly unusual layout, with a biscuit barrel shaped tank sitting somewhere between the rider's legs. This of course brought a very low centre of gravity, excellent for racing, which is something at which these machines excelled in particular. In fact, so successful were they that other manufacturers demanded that the bikes be handicapped because they were firing twice as often, and this they regarded as cheating. Later models, bowing to fashion, would adopt a more conventional fuel tank. But even this looks distinctly modern when you consider the era in which it was built. A water-cooled two-stroke, parallel twin with automatic lubrication, decades before Yamaha. Could this bike be any more pioneering? Well, yes they could, because the Scott was one of the first bikes to actually use telescopic forks. Now I know you thought BMW invented the things, but actually they didn't. What BMW did was use hydraulic damping for the first time. The Scott uses friction damping, and this can make the forks look rather like girder forks. but in fact some models really do use telescopic forks. After the subsequent departure and the death of Angus Scott in 1923, the company would struggle on but never be as successful as it had been in its early days. Nevertheless, Scott is one of the most important and one of the most influential motorcycle manufacturers of all time. The Ducati Pantah. After the failure of its 1976 parallel twins, Ducati turned to its designer Fabio Taglioni to develop something which would be commercially somewhat more successful. Using his 1973 Grand Prix racer as a basis, Taglioni developed an engine which used belt drive to the camshafts rather than the bevel drive on earlier Ducatis. This was much simpler and cheaper and cut the development and production costs down considerably. The first model, 500cc 50 horsepower sporty twin, first went into production in 1980, and this was later enlarged out to 600. It didn't take long for the real potential of the new engine to be realised by the Ducati management, and 650 and 750cc race versions of the engine were soon developed and proved very successful. Being lighter, simpler and cheaper to manufacture, the new engine would soon kill off the old bevel drive V twins. And today, all modern Ducatis owe their existence to the Pantah, making it quite possibly the most important motorcycle Ducati ever developed. Well, I do hope you enjoyed our selection of 5 very important motorcycles. Tell me, what motorcycles do you think were important? What were the most influential motorcycles in your mind? Please comment below. And if you enjoyed that video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.